All right, we're here for Father's Day, this version of Unraveled, kind of going through Daryl's sermon about that. And so let's first start about the title, Imperfect Fathers. And you, out of the gate, you're talking about we're not going to take the usual route of Father's Day. We're Mother's Day, we're going to encourage them and lift them up. And Father's Day, normally, we're just going to beat you down and kind of figure it out.
You're doing wrong.
Yeah, yeah. And so why'd you decide to go the direction you did?
Well, I even sort of mentioned that in the sermon just as a half a joke, but like people are like looking at me like the women are thinking like, I don't know if that's true or not. But anyways, yeah, I don't know. It just feels like, being on this side of it, and it's easy to hold guys accountable and want to encourage, women, I guess, the moms. And I'm not saying we shouldn't, but, I didn't want it to be a hammer session. Like I want it to be more like, we all as fathers feel there's times that, we could do better and we should have done this. And maybe we put our own self-interest ahead, and then hearing Paul's words that are very pointed, that sometimes our sin will even exasperate our kids, is a hard thing to hear. And so I just wanted to try to really flip the overall theme to like, yeah, we mess up and that's obvious, but there's grace, and show yourself some grace, and God's called you to lead and to be a father, even though, and he knew you weren't going to be perfect. And so, I don't know, that's just the angle I knew I needed to have something a little shorter than normal too. So it couldn't be, so I just kind of like the one verse, kind of reset.
As a whole over your sermon, for somebody who walked in there thinking, maybe he thinks he's failing as a father, and what did you hope that they walked out of there feeling? Just encouragement, or what something?
Yeah, I think so. Just, the fact that, children are a blessing from the Lord. So like if it's not an accident, if he gave you kids, whether it be one or, a dozen or anywhere in between, he made you a father. He knew who you were. He knows who you are. He knows who even you will be. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't want people to feel defeated. Like we can't change our past, but we can change moving forward. That's why I tried to really, I know often I'll talk to people like my age and older and they maybe either didn't live for the Lord or didn't really raise their kids up in the church, and they'll get it, they'll get in their 60s or 70s, whatever. And their kids are now like your age, you guys' ages, and they're not living for the Lord. And it's like a big regret. And they just feel like, well, what can I say now? What can I do now? And, sometimes, the reality is if kids don't get saved before they get out of high school, statistically, fewer of them will. But the point is that we can't change our past, but no matter where we're at, you can be transparent with your kids now. And, hey, I wish I would have done this or that different. And I don't know, just I think transparency and even, what's the word I'm looking for? But like, realizing like showing humility with your kids, I think is really important, because they know we mess up, and we won't know we mess up, but sometimes we're too proud to admit any of it.
I don't know if my daughter knows I mess up yet.
Not yet.
She'll find it.
Yeah, I know. Give her another year when she's 2.
Yeah.
No, daddy. No, daddy.
I want us all to think back to kind of the first time we became a dad, like right in the beginning, and maybe the expectations of what we thought we were going to be like, what we thought fatherhood was going to be like in the beginning. Kind of, did it meet expectations? Did it not meet expectations? You mentioned your experience with Ryan out of the gate. You're thinking, I got 2 weeks before I'm going to become a dad, and he comes 2 weeks early in that whole experience. So just recap that real quick for somebody who maybe missed the sermon, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. So, Dina was older as we, were approaching, we were called a high-risk pregnancy just because of her age and everything. So they wanted us to come in every week, and we had like 3 weeks to go, mainly to check her blood pressure and stuff. And we went over, I remember it was a Wednesday, and they're like, you're not leaving. Your blood pressure's too high. We're going to induce you first thing in the morning. And it was like, okay, here we go. And, and then, she ended up having a C-section because she wasn't able to the whatever, I can't remember the name of that drug, but didn't, Pitocin, there we go. So anyways, because she had the C-section, she had to be in 3 days or 3.5 days. And then we get home, and like I said, we knew they were coming. It's not that it was a surprise, but her mom and her sister had very opinionated things to what she should do, even like, and so it was just it was a debacle, train wreck. It is really putting it mildly. So yeah, I'm sure you guys have your own. But I even remember like coming out of Pontiac Hospital and like thinking, am I getting that seatbelt locked in tight enough? Just the whole deal.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, it looks good. I'm like, you sure? And then you're driving like,
you're going to
heads on a
let me
swivel.
take this thing home? What are you thinking, you crazy hospital people? So our story is a little similar to that one. It was 4.5 weeks before the due date, and we were up in Chicago for a friend's wedding. And, we're staying at Brenda's folks' house because they're in the suburbs. And we all drive up to the wedding together. It's an hour into the city. And, we haven't washed the baby's new clothes because we just had the shower the weekend before. I'm like, okay, we'll do it after the wedding. And Brenda goes into labor on the way to the wedding.
Oh, wow.
So we are 3.5 hours from home. Brenda and I are both in wedding clothes. And she starts to go into labor, and neither of us knew what it was like. So she thought, it's just got to be Braxton Hicks. But then we started timing them. We called the nurse. She's like, yeah, you should go get looked at. And we went to a hospital up there in the suburbs, close to Brenda's folks' house. And they're like, yeah, you're not going home.
Yeah.
It's like,
here we go. Yeah.
We don't have the car seat. We don't have the baby clothes. So yeah, talk about a shock. I understood that feeling very well. But for me, even just the lead up to that, it took us a long time to get to one child. And so like at the start of that journey, you start to question, like, am I ever going to get to even be a father?
Yeah.
And, that goes through all kinds of colors and flavors as the years progress. Like you give up hope, and then you get hope, and then you at some point you just learn to live with it, and it almost becomes like a numbness. But, when Celeste was born, after my first thought of, wow, she looks like a Sasquatch, she came out with a real coney head. It was very funny.
A little too revealing here, Gus.
Yeah, sorry.
She listened to this 10 years from now.
I know. Yeah, sorry, little bug. My second thought was, holy crud, I'm a dad. Yeah, and like since then, I keep the pressure pretty low on both myself and Brenda, but as long as Celeste is happy and healthy, and as long as we're trying to lead each other towards the Lord, that's kind of our bar. And that's fortunately a low bar to meet. The rest is in God's hands. We realized that pretty early when she came unexpected early that way. So it's just like, there's only so much we can do.
How early was she?
A few days before a month. So she had to stay in the NICU for a few days. And so we were sleeping on Brenda's parents' spare room, and like driving back and forth to the hospital. It was a whole mess.
So all the stuff that was at your house, somebody had brought it up to you? Or
Nope.
something?
I had to go back.
Oh, okay.
So I left my recently unpregnanted wife up there. Yeah.
Okay.
It was crazy times.
That's great. Well, your stories are about the opposite of mine, in the fact that we had ours late every single time. And
Good.
So they were all planned inductions. And so Cora was 2 weeks late, and then we were supposed to go in the induction the next morning at 7:00 in the morning. And so her parents were in town. We were living in Hannibal at the time. And so then they called us at like 3 PM and said, we'll actually take you at 7 tonight. And so we were all like going to go out to Chinese, our one last supper together, before we go in. And so we ended up going in early. And then actually, I think it was the opposite. I think we're supposed to go in that night, and then they changed it on us. That's what it was. But yeah, so then it was, I don't know how long the delivery was, but yeah, then we brought her home, and then Rosalie was the same thing. So they had to induce her, and they were going to have the same birthdays. They were going to induce her on the same day. I'm like, if we have the choice, can we not give them the same birthdays? So they're almost 2 years exactly apart. So, but yeah, each kid is different. Each delivery is different. But as you're coming into becoming a dad, did you have, obviously you both had journeys of infertility and working through that. And but once you've obviously were holding your newborn baby, did you have hopes and dreams of what you thought fatherhood would be like? And maybe I thought it was going to go this way. It totally went the other way. Obviously we're all different age groups here, but did you have expectations of what you wanted to be like as a dad, what you kind of all that? So whoever wants to take the floor on that, but
I don't know if I really did. I'm trying to remember back. A lot has happened.
Sure.
My brain's kind of foggy right now, but
yeah, I don't know. I remember just, in the beginning and sleeping and stuff like that. Everything's thrown out of whack. And then, just Ryan was, I don't know, he wasn't really taken to breastfeeding real well and all of that. So there was struggles there. And then, Dina always needs sleep. Like that's as an adult, before kids, after kids, all that. So it just, there was all of that. And then I'm, working and stuff like that. So I don't know, trying to figure all that out in the beginning was, you just felt, I don't know, I remember feeling exhausted like all the time. Like when you're home, you were doing stuff, and when you were sleeping, you weren't sleeping, and just.
You're not still exhausted all the time? Man, lucky.
Yeah. Ryan changes his own diaper now.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's right. I just remember feeling like it was a good day if I felt like I was able to help Brenda and help Celeste. If I could take a few diaper changes to help the baby, and if I could bath the baby and feed her once or twice, that was kind of my bar. But I don't know why I set my bar there. Now that I'm looking back, it's like, why did I pick that as my goal? And I guess that's just because maybe it was the survival mode.
Yeah.
How much of your thoughts as you coming into a dad came from your dad? Like, did you guys look at your dad and say, there's a lot of qualities about my dad I want to bring into my fatherhood? Or what would you guys think about that before?
Not overtly, I don't think. But I think I think now I do more than then. Like I see, I see some of the things that I do that I know clearly is like my dad, and some of them good and some of them not. Now, my wife will occasionally point out, "You're like your dad there again." But yeah, like I remember always looking forward to the next like stage. Like, I'm like holding them in the very beginning is kind of tough. You got to hold the head, the whole deal, and you're hoping for a little. And then, when they're actually you're looking forward to them walking, and then then there's the bumps and bruises, and then like. Before he was walking, you just take the car seat and we could still go to dinner and just plop him there and it's all good. And then we didn't go to dinner. It felt like for about 5 years or something.
Yeah.
And it was always in a McDonald's or something. So I was always looking for, when he can walk, when he can do this, when he can do that, when he'll be out of diapers, when he goes to school. I don't know. And then you look back now he's 15 almost, and you think, where did the time go? And so, yeah.
It's almost encouraging that you can hear too, because we're both, all in different seasons, but like enjoy the season that you're in, because it will go fast. And probably almost you wish, like, I wish Ryan was back here in his younger days. So I can
pick him up and hold him again. Right.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things one of the reels I was going to quote from, but couldn't verify the statistics, but these two pastors were talking about how important it is to raise our kids up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, especially in their up till their high school years. And they threw out a statistic. They said the average person, after your kid leaves home, like to go to college, and they said you'll see them 50 times or less the rest of their life on average. And like that really hits home.
Yeah.
Now, like you see your folks every week, and everybody's a little different, but but I even thought, for the last 18 years, I've been seeing my dad once a week, and when you start to think about that, you realize how fleeting time is. And that's why it's so important that we show our kids faith, and not in a superficial way, but, they should see it through our authenticity. We should have them go to church. We should, model for them, not only going to church, but like looking forward to going to church, reading our Bibles and, praying, serving, even giving, show your kids how you do that. All that stuff is so, imprinting on them to go back to that turkey guy back way back when, we imprint these things on our kids. I remember my first job cutting grass, I was getting $10 or whatever. And my dad's like, taught me about giving $1 to the Lord and stuff, that stuff stays with you. So.
And it goes right into your quote. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, go ahead.
I would just say it goes right into your quote of more caught than taught, right?
Yeah.
Right out of the gate. And so that's so true. Like my words matter, but like at the end of the day, they're such good watchers of me, and then and then I start to see the good and the bad coming out of my kid, and then it's like a mirror, especially some of my daughters more than others. Rosalie's almost like a little mini me, but in a lot of ways, but it's it is so much more motivating watching that, because like going right into the pitfalls and that you mentioned. And selfishness was one of those things that when I reflect back on when I first became a dad, it was revealing how selfish I really was with my time, with my energy, with my focuses. It was like, well, this thing requires my attention. And before I can, my wife, she was working, we kind of were passing by a little bit, but then once the kid's here, like there's no hiding. Yeah. It's all like, well, I want to go play some golf. Like, well, this kid is here and he's missed you all day, whatever. Yeah. And so before I was like, yeah, I could go play golf. I'll go do something at the house. But now, so there was a lot of selfishness, nowhere near fixed, but there's a lot of selfishness I had to kind of dig out through that because of that. So what were you going to say, or what do you have to add?
I was just going to say that I have been compared a lot to my dad. We're very similar personalities. We think similar, we act similar, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, or in this case, the nut doesn't fall far from the tree. But, when I was growing up, that mattered a lot more to me. But as I kind of grew up, I started to think less about like, oh, am I doing this because it's like dad? And I started to think about like, I don't even care about that. I don't think about it as like, is this something that Gus would do? And when it comes to parenting, I'm fortunate. Mom and dad are great models. And so are my older brother and his wife. They're just excellent models of what it means to be a good, godly family and good, godly parents. And so I can look to them and be like, hey, that works out really well for them. Maybe I'll try it, see how it fits. And I've been fortunate to be able to try that in a few places in my life. But you were asking about like, do we look to our own fathers for guidance and stuff? And I do, but I also don't let that guide me because my dad wasn't perfect. And anybody who knows him closely knows that, but
I remember my dad always said that, my dad was a pretty good golfer. And I remember he always said, I stopped playing golf when you were born. Like I was the fourth kid, and he could still play some, when there was 3 kids or whatever, but there wasn't the time or the money, and he gave it up for, for many years. And we had a 5th kid too. And that goes along into, something we need to, it's not that playing golf's wrong or whatever, but, where is the priority? And
because he didn't have to do that.
Right.
I mean, he could have just sacrificed time with you guys and continued to play golf.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but that's a great model. You mentioned this in the sermon a little bit, talking about like pushing maybe your interests, your desires onto your kids, maybe living vicariously through them. Does either of you have experience with either that happened to you or maybe you're doing it personally? Because I know for me, like I'll start with
go ahead.
Having 4 girls. I played college baseball. I'm thinking, middle. Softball, I need. Yeah. Well, no. I was thinking, first of all, I was not going to have any girls because, like, I was 4 boys in the house. Like I was raised around boys, and so God was like, no. But yeah, I had this expectation. I'm like, shortstop, second base, double play combination. We're going to have a baseball team. It's going to be awesome. Yeah. And then Cora came, and then Rosalie came, and then just girl after girl after girl. And and my girls, we did softball last year, and it was great. But like through this process, it's been like it's not about that. It's about like quality time with them, and they're gonna have their own interests. Like Cora loves theater, she loves music, and that's my wife's side comes into there. So so for your guys, did you feel either pressured to go a certain route because of your parents, or did you feel like you pushed that onto your child?
Yeah, no, I really didn't feel that pressure from my dad. I mean, my dad loved baseball, and because he loved baseball, like I loved baseball. We used to, back before there was all kinds of cable TV, some games were on, but I remember listening to the radio and man, didn't get any better than that, like filling out little box scores and the whole deal and all that kind of thing. And so like with Ryan, I just had the mindset I wasn't going to try to, sports honestly is all I know. Like, we did everything, we did every sport there was. And, I was always able to, kind of succeed in them. And that doesn't seem like that's Ryan's thing, but I'm almost glad. I don't know. I just see, and don't hear me wrong, I still love sports, but I just see almost the cycle that it feels like you have to get in with sports. Like, you're not going to play on school teams if you're not doing all the summer things with everything else. You're taking a step back, or if you're not going to do this or that. And I'm glad we don't, Ryan never really took to baseball or basketball or any of that stuff. And he looks like he's going to play golf. But even that, I'm trying not to push him too hard. I don't want him to, if he likes it just for me, I don't want, but I would rather him do that than, Call of Duty, 18 hours a day. So, there's always that tension, but I really try not to, we try to celebrate, he does well in school, probably better than I did. honestly, I don't remember what I did as a grade school
FFA,
kid.
man. He's like
FFA, that's right.
FFA, you know?
Yeah.
That'll mark his future for sure, or it can help him a lot. But what would you say for you? But did you feel pressure to do certain things, or?
No, not with my family. But, when I was still teaching as band director, that was like the first question people would ask somebody, like if you have kids, are they going to do band? Mm-hmm. It's like, don't even ask me that.
That's your wife was in band too.
That's how we met.
Yeah,
we both played the same instrument. We're in some of the same bands and stuff at college at ISU. And so that's always the question people ask. And I'm sure they'll ask pastors, like, are they going to grow up to be a pastor, or, be in the ministry, or be a what do they call somebody who goes abroad to
missionaries?
Thank you. I know English people, I promise. So are they going to grow up to be a missionary? Are they going to grow up to be like you guys? And I think kids are naturally interested and curious about what their parents are interested in. So I'm sure Celeste will see me doing a bunch of instrument stuff, and she'll be like, how does this work? And she'll probably break my guitar in half first time she tries it. But that's okay. I'll expose her to whatever she wants to learn, but I'm not going to force her to be somebody that's not her.
Yeah.
And so
that's good.
Yeah.
That's good reminder. Back to the sermon here, you mentioned the Kent Hughes quote about the wet bar of soap. And so why don't you kind of go over that illustration and kind of just why that was important to bring in?
Yeah, I just think, I don't know, just throughout life, like remember my time back as a kid and having friends and having some of their parents not involved in anything laissez-faire. Those kids could run wild. And then other parents that I saw just, trying to be so controlling, and there's that happy medium or whatever, that if we're trying to hold the reins too tight, I just think that's, it's not, it's like we're trying to control, and we're not allowing God to kind of aid us in that. And I think when we, I think that my sermon could have had the potential of coming across like I'm not a disciplinarian, or not like the kid's just going to roll the roost and do whatever they want. And if you know me, that's not my style. Like there's usually a parent that's more grace and more truth, and I'm the more truth one in our family. Than my wife shows a little bit more grace, I guess. So, but I just think, if we try to control those kids, I just see kids not respond well to controlling parents, whether it's, like they got to be perfect, or they got to, the expectations for grades, or whatever it might be, expectations for sports, whatever. When we put undue burdens on kids, and that's where I think, to go back to sports again, there's all these statistics about percentage of kids that are dropping out of sports by the time they're like sophomores in high school. And, these kids were the next prodigies when they were 8, 9, 10, and then they played 900 games, and, they don't even want to play anymore. And I think parents, we can wear our kids out. And, I even heard last night in the ball game, they had it on the Fox game last night, and John Kruk was talking about it, and I can't remember who the other announcer, but they were both talking about, he said, I played everything. I had played probably 25 baseball games a year. He said, now some of these kids are playing 125 a year. And he's like, I would have never stayed with baseball if and so, I mean, that's a Sports Illustration, but I just think when there's, you got to let the kid have freedom. I think you got to let them grow. You got to let them pursue, different things. And of course we support them in all of it. But, when the real danger is when we try to, kind of relive again through our kids. And of course, no one would ever say they do that. But when we're really trying to steer them towards whatever, that's where I think we're in danger of losing them, so to speak.
Yeah, there's a quote that I think a parenting book I read one time or whatever was talking about. It's rules without relationships leads to rebellion. And it was, again, it means a lot because I feel like Marie and I hold our girls to a high standard, but so often I challenge myself, or like I feel convicted about, is it all about the rules? Like, is there worth being formed in, if I keep all of daddy and mommy's rules, then I'm good. Yeah. So that's the last thing I want them to view God like. If I just keep all the things, then I'm going to be okay with God, and that's the challenge I feel as a parent, because sometimes I feel like we're modeling that of, if you can keep doing what we ask you to do, all things are going to be good for you. But I mean, there's some truth to that, but it's not all they're worth coming from that. So Anything to add on
I
that?
was just thinking that if you look at how God holds us, like the bar of soap, he's the best example of how to hold just the right amount. He gave us slack, but he also gives us support too, if we ask for it. So he could have held us tighter, kept us from sinning. He could have put up a fence around the tree of knowledge of good and evil, but he didn't. He knew just how tight to hold us, and it's a great example to think of.
You close the sermon talking about the goal of our kids, parenting our kids, is not to be self-reliant, but to just know God well. And so, because I think my dad, and I think if he was sitting here, would say that his goal, especially when we were younger kids, were just, I want them to be independent men that can go take care of a family, which is important. I'm not saying it's not. And I think he was, but at the end of the day, I think, and you can piggyback off of this, if you are following after God, then that also creates you to be independent and to love your wife well and that kind of thing. So what you go into that as we finish?
Yeah, I just there's such a high call for having our kids like learn and grow in faith, and not when we're young, when the kids are younger, it's kind of like I believe this because my dad believes it, the church believes it, or whatever. And then when they start to come into those teenage years, where their mind's being formed, even in the college years, there's such an importance of having them learn to trust in God, having them learn to rely on God, having them learn to to have a daily walk with God. And it again, that's more caught than taught. It's not. That won't happen by the words. That'll happen when your kids, see you in prayer, when your kids see that you read God's word. I remember even like a little thing what my dad used to do, but every Saturday we didn't have new clothes. Like we struggled a little bit financially, I guess you'd say. We always had what we needed. But I remember every Saturday, almost invariably, down in the basement, he had one of those little shoe shine kits, and he had shoe shine stuff. And we used to, he used to shine his own shoes. He used to shine our shoes. Like we were gonna we didn't have a lot, but even if it was gonna look our best, and like that's not about like we're gonna look our best because we're show off. No, it's like that shows like the importance of preparation for the next day, and we're going to give our best to God the next day, and all of that. So like those little things are just so, and then consistency, I think there's a lot of areas I could talk about here, but like I remember I mentioned a few times our church split. We had a church of about 1,200, and a week it went 2 churches of 600, and we had some of our family go one direction, the other, and it was a brutal time. But it would have been easy to throw in the towel. My dad was in leadership, and so he took a lot of. But we always went. We always had a place to go. We never like. Even on vacation, we invariably we would go somewhere, and that just. You hate it as a kid sometimes, but you see like, what mom and dad are teaching us. And those things are because like, again, I've sat with families, later in life, and, their kids are, sick, and they have this disease and that disease, and they haven't followed the Lord forever. And boy, it's tough. Like if you don't find it, there are people that have come to the Lord as adults, but boy, if you don't find it young, it's hard. We're set in our ways. We're stubborn. We're hard-hearted. We're not I didn't need God before. I can do it on my own now, and then it's like too little too late, or at least it feels like it. So,
yeah, so much of it is, like you said, what is prioritized in the home. And I know that my dad, in the beginning, when I was a young kid, he would go to church because like that was what they agreed, like mom and dad, it was important. Not to say his spiritual walk was just beginning at that point, but just like, no matter what, no matter if I wanted to go or not, we were going. And it did instill something in me. Like you said, I wasn't checking my watch, every 15 minutes. But yeah, it instilled the priorities and we weren't doing anything on Sunday morning except for going to church. It wasn't like, it was a big deal if we had to miss church. So anything else to add before we close up? All right. So we're going to go back to Genesis this coming week, right? Yep. So back in the Genesis series.
3, probably verses 8 through 13 this week. And it's kind of where Adam and Eve are now hiding in the garden, and God's asking them questions, and God knows the answers to those questions, but he wants confession. So it'll be good stuff.
I got a good classical music joke to wrap us up with. Yeah. You ready?
I'd love to hear it.
All right.
Classical musical joke.
It's about a classical composer and Adam and Eve in the garden.
Okay.
They were Haydn.
So that's the name of a composer, I'm assuming.
Franz Joseph Haydn.
Okay.
All right.
There you go. Dad joke.
Don't quit your day job, brother. Yeah.
All right, on that,
Sorry.
why don't you close us out and pray for Gus's joke.
I know. I couldn't resist. I got a problem.
God, we're thankful to be fathers, and God, we fall short, and we learn often from what we see, and we're thankful each of us three have fathers that believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, and that's that puts us maybe a few steps ahead of people that never saw that at home. So we're thankful for that. But God, no matter where we're at in our spiritual walk, our journey, whether we're a mother or father, a brother or sister, whatever, wherever we're at in life, may we grow towards you. May we, fatherhood is kind of sometimes a hot topic. Sometimes it brings up difficult memories, and sometimes it's all about celebrating Dad because we had great ones. But wherever it's at, it's so important that we have a Heavenly Father. Each of us does, if we know you as Lord and Savior. So God, just guide us and lead us. May we always follow you. It's in the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.